Hello, hello, billionairettes. Welcome back to another Read With Me session on Daring Greatly by Brené Brown. So happy and grateful that you are here. If you've been following along, let me know in the comments who you are, how you are loving this book, or your thoughts in general about this book. We are currently on Disruptive Engagement, page 190, 199, around there. And we're diving into part 2 of 2 today of Disruptive Engagement chapter. And so super excited. Would love to know your thoughts here. And if you're just joining us for the first time, hello, my name is Vanessa Black, and I'm one of the founders and owners of Billionaire. And we're on a mission here every single day. You know, we are impacting souls all over the world to achieve personal freedom and financial freedom in their lives, because both of those are very important. And we do that by developing our minds, our bodies, and our souls on a daily basis. And one of the ways that we've been heavily doing that this year is by reading specific hand-chosen books on both topics, personal freedom and financial freedom. This is our personal freedom book of the month right here. Isabel's currently reading Good to Great by Jim Collins, an incredible book for the financial freedom book featured of the month. So go check it out if you haven't yet, or if that interests you, if you're a business owner, if you're looking to take your company from good to great, a phenomenal book. If you're looking to become a good leader and move to the great leader, phenomenal book. So I appreciate you. So happy and grateful you're here. And we're going to invest the next 20 to 25 minutes to dive into the rest of this chapter of Disruptive Engagement. It's been a phenomenal book by Brené Brown with so much data-driven information that she's sharing in here based on all her interviews. If you've never heard of Brené Brown, she is a researcher, an expert researcher on shame and vulnerability, and she does countless interviews with the people of the world and gathers her data, and she put a lot of it in this particular book of Daring Greatly. Going into the next year, we want to make sure that we are prepared, equipped, and have all we need to dare greatly on a whole nother level as leaders here. And so I'm excited to continue to read this book, and let's do it. All right. Appreciate you. And make sure to share this book if you're finding value from it. Share this audio. And if you haven't gotten the book physical copy yet, go ahead and do that. It's an awesome, awesome book. And you can listen in and read at the same time. Okay. I would love to know, do you listen in and read at the same time? Or do you just like listening in? Or do you just like reading the book? Would love to know your feedback here, your honest feedback. And if you are enjoying these Read With Me sessions where Isabel and I are reading them to you, each chapter, each page as well, would love to know your feedback. Or maybe you're like, you know what, if you just provided a summary of all the chapters, that would even be better. Let us know. We're trying to make things better to be more impactful for you as well. So we have just dove into, in the last Read With Me session, the blame game and cover up culture. So we also did minding the gap with feedback, and that's where we left off. So actually, I'm going to pick up on page 197, minding the gap with feedback. Got your water? What are you drinking? You got your tea, your coffee? What do you got? I got some water here today. We are actually in Mexico right now. We've been living here this entire year, the past 12 months, and we are preparing, we're packing, because we're going to be moving back to the US. We're not sure which specific states. We're thinking about doing like a month or 2 months in different states, like Austin, Texas, maybe South Florida, maybe California. I don't know. We're excited. But yeah, definitely looking forward to continuing. Okay. Cheers to you. Minding the gap with feedback. Okay. A daring greatly culture is a culture of honest, constructive, and engaged feedback. This is true in organizations, schools, and families. I know families struggle with this issue. However, I was shocked to see lack of feedback emerge as a primary concern in the interviews that focused on work experiences. Today, organizations are so metric focused in their evaluation of performance that giving, receiving, and soliciting valuable feedback, ironically, has become rare. It's even a rarity in schools where learning depends on feedback, which is infinitely more effective than grades scribbled on the top of a page or computer-generated standardized test scores. The problem is straightforward. Without feedback, there can be no transformative change. When we don't talk to the people we're leading about their strengths and their opportunities for growth, they begin to question their contributions and our commitment, and disengagement follows. When I ask people why there was such a lack of feedback in their organizations and schools, they use different language, but the two major issues were the same. One, we're not comfortable with hard conversations, and two, we don't know how to give and receive feedback in a way that moves people and processes. The good news is that these are very fixable problems. If an organization makes the creation of a feedback culture a priority and a practice, rather than an aspirational value, it can happen. People are desperate for feedback. We all want to grow. We just need to learn how to give feedback in a way that inspires growth and engagement. Right off the bat, I believe that feedback thrives in cultures where the goal is not getting comfortable with hard conversations, but normalizing discomfort. If leaders expect real learning, critical thinking, and change, then discomfort should be normalized. We believe growth and learning are uncomfortable, so it's going to happen here. You're going to feel that way. We want you to know that it's normal, and it's an expectation here. You are not alone, and we ask that you stay open and lean into it. This is true at all levels and in all organizations, schools, faith communities, and even families. I've observed this pattern of normalized discomfort in the wholehearted organizations I've researched, and I've lived it in my classroom and with my family. I learned to teach by immersing myself in books on engaged and critical pedagogy by writers like Bell Hooks and Paulo Freire. At first, I was terrified by the idea that if education is going to preach transformative, it's going to be uncomfortable and unpredictable. Now, as I begin my 15th year of teaching at the University of Houston, I always tell my students, if you're comfortable, I'm not teaching and you're not learning. It's going to get uncomfortable in here, and that's okay. It's normal and it's part of the process. The simple and honest process of letting people know that discomfort is normal, it's going to happen, why it happens, and why it's important, reduces anxiety, fear, and shame. Periods of discomfort become an exception and a norm. In fact, most semesters, I have students who approach me after class and say, quote, "I haven't been uncomfortable yet. I'm concerned." These exchanges often lead to critically important conversations and feedbacks about their engagement in my teaching. The big challenge for leaders is getting our hearts and heads around the fact that we need to cultivate the courage to be uncomfortable and to teach the people around us how to accept discomfort as part of growth. This is huge, great info. So if we're comfortable, there's something up with the engagement or the teaching. So letting people know that is a normal thing and it's part of growth. For the best guidance on how to give feedback that moves people and processes forward, I turn to my social work roots. In my experience, the heart of valuable feedback is taking the strengths perspective. According to social work educator Dennis, viewing performance from the strengths perspective offers us the opportunity to examine our struggles in light of our capacities, talents, competencies, possibilities, visions, values, and hopes. This perspective doesn't dismiss the serious nature of our struggles. However, it does require us to consider our positive qualities as potential resources. Dr. Selby proposes, quote, it is as wrong to deny the possible as it is to deny the problem. One effective method for understanding our strength is to examine the relationship between strengths and limitations. If we look at what we do best as well as what we want to change the most, we will often find that the two are varying degrees of the same core behavior. Most of us can go through the majority of our faults or limitations and find strengths lurking within. For example, I can beat myself up for being too controlling and micromanaging, or I can recognize that I'm very responsible, dependable, and committed to quality work. The micromanaging issues don't go away, but by viewing them from a strengths perspective, I have the confidence to look at myself and assess the behaviors I'd like to change. I want to emphasize that the strengths perspective is not a tool to simply allow us to put a positive spin on a problem and consider it solved. But by first enabling us to inventory our strengths, it suggests ways we can use those strengths to address the related challenges. One way I teach this perspective to students is by requiring them to give and receive feedback on their classroom presentations. When a student presents, she receives feedback from every one of his or her classmates. The students in the audience have to identify 3 observable strengths and 1 opportunity for growth. The trick is that they have to use their assessment of the strengths to make a suggestion on how the individual might address a specified opportunity. For example, she gives an example. Strengths. You captured my interest right away with your emotional, personal story. That's number 1. Number 2, you use examples that are relevant to my life. 3, you concluded with actionable strategies that tied in with our learning in the class. And here's the opportunity for growth. Your stories and examples made me feel connected to you and what you are saying, but I sometimes struggle to read the PowerPoint and listen to you at the same time. I didn't want to miss anything you were saying, but I worried about not following the slides. You might experiment with fewer words on the slides, or maybe even no slides. You had me without them. The research has made this clear. Vulnerability is at the heart of the feedback process. This is true whether we give, receive, or solicit feedback. And the vulnerability doesn't go away even if we're trained and experienced in offering and getting feedback. Experience does, however, give us the advantage of knowing that we can survive the exposure and uncertainty and that it's worth the risk. One of the greatest mistakes that I see people make in the feedback process is armoring up. To protect ourselves from the vulnerability of giving or receiving feedback, we get ready to rumble. It's easy to assume that the feedback process only feels vulnerable for the person receiving the feedback, but that's not true. Honest engagement around expectations and behaviors is always fraught with uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure for everyone involved. Here's an example. Susan, the principal of a large high school, has a talk to one of her teachers about several parent complaints. The parents have voiced concerns about the teacher's cursing during class and making personal calls on her cell phone while she allows her students to leave the class, goof off, and make their own calls. In this situation, armoring up can take several forms. One is that Susan can fill out the probation form and have it sitting on her desk when the teacher comes in. She'll simply say, here's the complaint. I've written you up for the following offenses. Sign here and don't let it happen again. She's knocked out the meeting in 3 minutes flat. There's no feedback, no growth, no learning, but it's over. The odds of the teacher changing her behaviors are slim. Another way we armor up is by convincing ourselves that the other person deserves to be hurt, put down. Like most of us, Susan is more comfortable with anger than vulnerability, so she ratchets up her confidence with a little self-righteousness. I'm so sick of this. If these teachers respected me, they never do stuff like this. I've had it. She's been a problem since the first day I met her. You want to jack around in class? Go for it. I'll show you exactly how this works. The opportunity for constructive feedback and relationship building turns into a smackdown. Again, it's over, but there is no feedback, no growth, no learning, and more than likely no change. I'll admit that I've got a lot of, quote, bring it on in me. I'm scrappy, I think fast on my feet, and I like my emotions with a little agency. I'm good at anger and only so at vulnerability. So armoring up before a vulnerable experience is attractive to me. Luckily, this work has taught me that when I feel self-righteous, it means I'm afraid. It's a way to puff up and protect myself when I'm afraid of being wrong, making someone angry, or getting blamed. Page 202, sitting on the same side of the table. In my social work training, a lot of attention was paid to how we talk to people, even down to where and how we sit. For example, I would never talk to a client across a desk. I would walk around my desk and sit in a chair across from the client. So there was nothing big and bulky between us. I remember the first time I went in to see one of my social work professors about a grade, she got up from behind her desk and asked me to take a seat at a small round table she had in her office. She pulled up a chair and sat next to me. In armoring up for that conversation, I had pictured her sitting behind her big metal desk and me defiantly sliding my paper across it and demanding an explanation for my grade. After she sat down next to me, I put the paper on the table, as she said. I'm so glad that you came in to talk to me about your paper. You did a great job on this. I loved your conclusion. And patted me on the back. I awkwardly realized that we were on the same side of the table. Totally discombobulated, I blurted, "Thank you. I worked really hard on it." She nodded and said, "I can tell. Thank you. I took some points off your APA formatting. I'd like for you to focus on that and get it cleaned up. You could submit this for publication, and I don't want the reference formatting to hold you back." I was still confused. She thinks it's publishable? She liked it? Do you need some help with the APA formatting? ? It's tricky, and it took me years to get it down, she asked. A great example of normalizing. I told her that I'd fix the references, and I asked her if she'd look at my revisions. She happily agreed and gave me a few tips on the process. I thanked her for her time and left, grateful for my grade and for a teacher who cared as much as she did. Today, quote, sitting on the same side of the table is my metaphor for feedback. I used it to create my engaged feedback checklist. And she goes into her checklist. I like that. What do you think? And this is the checklist here. I know I'm ready to give feedback when I'm ready to sit next to you rather than across from you. I'm willing to put the problem in front of us rather than between us or sliding it towards you. I'm ready to listen, ask questions, and accept that I may not fully understand the issue. I want to acknowledge what you do well instead of picking apart your mistakes. I recognize your strengths and how you can use them to address your challenges. I can hold you accountable without shaming or blaming you. I'm willing to own my part. I can genuinely thank you for your efforts rather than criticize you for your failings. I can talk about how resolving these challenges will lead to your growth and opportunity. And I can model the vulnerability and openness that I expect to see from you. And you can find a printed copy of this checklist on my website, Brené Brown's website, www.brenebrown.com. How would education be different if students, teachers, and parents sat on the same side of the table? How would engagement change if leaders sat down next to folks and said, "Thank you for your contributions. Here's how we're making a difference. This issue is getting in the way of your growth, and I think we can tackle it together. What ideas do you have about moving forward? What role do you think I'm playing in the problem? What can I do differently to support you?" Let's go to the example with Susan, the principal who was armoring up for a smackdown. If she read through this checklist, she'd realize that she's not in a place to give feedback, to be a leader. But with parenting complaints stacking up on her desk, time is an issue for her, and she knows the situation needs to be addressed. It can be very difficult to move into the right head and heart space to give feedback when we're under pressure. So how do we create a safe space for vulnerability and growth when we're not feeling open? Armored feedback doesn't facilitate lasting and meaningful change. I don't know a single person who can be open to accepting feedback or owning responsibility for something when they're being hammered. Our hard wiring takes over and we self-protect. Susan's best bet is to model the openness that she hopes to see and solicit feedback from one of her colleagues. When I interviewed the participants who valued feedback and worked at it, They talked about the necessity of soliciting feedback from their peers, asking for advice, and even role-playing difficult situations. If we're not willing to ask for feedback and receive it, we'll never be good at giving it. If Susan can work through her own feelings so that she can be present with her employee, she's much more likely to see the change that she's requesting. Some of you might be wondering, Susan's employee problem is pretty straightforward and small. Why would she need to spend time soliciting feedback from one of her colleagues for a problem like that? Quote, it's a good question with an important answer. The size, severity, or complexity of a problem doesn't always reflect our emotional reactivity to it. If Susan can't get the same side of the table with this teacher, it doesn't matter how simple the problem is or how clear the violation is. What Susan might learn from her peer is that she's really triggered by this particular teacher, or that she's armoring up because unprofessional behavior is becoming a dangerous norm among this cluster of teachers. Giving and soliciting feedback is about learning and growth and understanding who we are and how we respond to the people around us in the foundation of this process. Again, there's no question that feedback may be one of the most difficult arenas to negotiate in our lives. We should remember, though, the victory is not getting good feedback, avoiding giving difficult feedback, or avoiding the need for feedback. Instead, it's taking off the armor, showing up, and engaging. The courage to be vulnerable. I recently gave a talk at the University of Houston's Wolf Center for Entrepreneurship. The program, which pairs 35 to 40 elite undergraduate students with mentors and offers comprehensive business training, is ranked as the leading undergrad entrepreneurship program in the United States. I was asked to talk to the students about vulnerability and the power of story. During the Q&A session after my talk, one of the students asked me a question that I'm sure is often on the minds of people when I talk about vulnerability. He said, I can see how vulnerability is important, but I'm in sales and I don't get what that looks like. Does being vulnerable mean that if a customer asks me a question about a product and I don't know the answer, I just say what I'm thinking? I'm new and I really don't know what I'm doing. The students, who were all turned around listening to him, turned back in their chairs and looked at me as if to say, yeah, that seems lame. Are we really supposed to do that? My answer was no and yes. In that scenario, vulnerability is recognizing and owning that you don't know something. It's looking the customer in the eye and saying, I don't know the answer to that, but I'll find out. I want to make sure you have the correct information. I explained that the unwillingness to engage with the vulnerability of not knowing often leads to making excuses, dodging the question, or worst case scenario, BSing. That's the death blow in any relationship. And the one thing I've learned from talking to people who sell for a living is that sales is all about relationships. So while I wouldn't take the track with the customer, or I wouldn't take that tack with the customer, I do think there's some value in sharing the feeling of not knowing what you're doing with someone, whether a mentor who can offer support and guidance or a colleague who can help you learn and normalize your experience. Imagine the stress and anxiety of not knowing what you're doing, trying to convince a customer that you do, not being able to ask for help, and not having anyone to talk to about your struggle. This is how we lose people. It's too difficult to stay engaged in these circumstances. We start cutting corners, we stop caring, and we check out. After my talk, one of the mentors came up to me and said, I've been in sales my entire career, and let me tell you, there's nothing more important than having the courage to say, I don't know, and I messed up. Being honest and open is key to success in every part of our lives. Last year, I had the opportunity to interview Gay Gaddis, the owner and founder of T3, the think tank, in Austin, Texas. T3 is a top integrated marketing firm that specializes in innovative marketing campaigns that cut across all media. In 1989, Gay cashed in a $16,000 IRA with the dream of starting an advertising agency. 23 years after opening with a handful of regional accounts, Gay has built T3 into the nation's largest advertising agency wholly owned by a woman. With offices in Austin, New York, and San Francisco, T3 works with clients including Microsoft, UPS, JP Morgan Chase, Pfizer, Allstate, Coca-Cola, and Sprite. Her dynamic business acumen and corporate culture have led to national recognition. She has been named one of the fastest companies' top 25 women business builders, Inc. magazine's top 10 entrepreneurs of the year, and one of the top 25 advertising working mothers of the year by Working Mother magazine. Gay and T3's family-friendly workplace program, T3 and Under, was even recognized by the White House. I jumped right into my interview with Gay by telling her that a business journalist has recently told me that unlike leaders in corporations who are shielded by layers of systems, entrepreneurs can't afford to be vulnerable. When I asked her what she thought about the proposition, she smiled. When you shut down vulnerability, you shut down opportunity. Here's how she explained it. Ready? By definition, entrepreneurship is vulnerable. It's all about the ability to handle and manage uncertainty. People are constantly changing. Budgets change, boards change, and competition means you have to stay nimble and innovative. You have to create a vision and live up to that vision. There is no vision without vulnerability. Knowing that Gay spends a considerable amount of time teaching and mentoring, I asked her what advice she gives new entrepreneurs about embracing uncertainty. She said, success requires entrepreneurs to cultivate strong support networks and good mentors. You need to learn how to shut out the noise so you can get clear on how you feel and what you think, and then you do the hard work. No question, it's all about vulnerability. Another great example of the power of vulnerability, this time in a corporation, is a leadership approach taken by Lululemon CEO, Christine Day. In a video interview with CNN Money, Day explained that she was once a very bright, smart executive who, quote, majored in being right. Her transformation came when she realized that getting people to engage and take ownership wasn't about the telling, but about letting them come into the idea in a purpose-led way, and that her job was creating the space for others to perform. She characterized this change as a shift from, quote, having the best idea or problem solving to being the best leader of people. The shift she described is a shift from controlling to engaging with vulnerability, taking risks and cultivating trust. And while vulnerability can sometimes make us feel powerless, her shift was a total power move. Day has increased the number of stores from 71 to 174, while total revenue has grown from $297 million to almost $1 billion. And Lululemon stock is up about 300% since its 2007 IPO. In a written interview with Day accompanying the video, the idea of vulnerability as a birthplace of creativity, innovation, and trust continued to play out, even when it comes to failure and defeat. One of Day's leadership guideposts is finding the magic makers. As they explain, taking responsibility, taking risk, and having an entrepreneurial spirit are qualities we look for in our employees. We want people who bring their own magic. Athletes are great within our cultures. They're used to winning as well as losing. They know how to handle and fix defeat. They also emphasize the importance of allowing people to make mistakes. Our golden rule, if you screw up, you clean it up. In businesses, schools, faith communities, any system, even families, we can tell a lot about how people engage with vulnerability by observing how often and how openly you hear people saying, I don't know, I need help, I'd like to give it a shot, it's important to me, I disagree, can we talk about it? It didn't work, but I learned a lot. Yes, I did it. Here's what I need. Here's how I feel. I'd like some feedback. Can I get your take on this? What can I do better next time? Can you teach me how to do this? I played a part in that. I accept responsibility for that. I'm here for you. I want to help. Let's move on. I'm sorry. That means a lot to me. Thank you. For leaders, vulnerability often looks and feels like discomfort. And in his book, Tribes, We Need You to Lead Us, Seth Godin writes, leadership is scarce because few people are willing to go through the discomfort required to lead. This scarcity makes leadership valuable. It's uncomfortable to stand up in front of strangers. It's uncomfortable to propose an idea that might fail. It's uncomfortable to challenge the status quo. It's uncomfortable to resist the urge to settle. When you identify the discomfort, you found the place where a leader is needed. If you're not uncomfortable in your work as a leader, it's almost certain you're not reaching your potential as a leader. As I looked over the data and read through my notes from the interviews I've done with leaders, I wonder what students would say to teachers and what teachers would say to their principals if they had the opportunity to ask for the leadership they needed. I wondered what the customer service representative would say to his boss and what she might ask of her boss. What do we want people to know about us and what do we need from them? As I started writing down the answers to these questions, I realized that they sounded like a mandate, a manifesto, and here's what emerged from these questions. And we're going to conclude this Read With Me session and this chapter with the Daring Greatly Leadership Manifesto. You can take a screenshot if you would like. All right, this is the manifesto, the Daring Greatly Leadership Manifesto. To the CEOs and teachers, to the principals and the managers, to the politicians, community leaders, and decision makers. We want to show up, we want to learn, and we want to inspire. We are hardwired for connection, curiosity, and engagement. We crave purpose, and we have a deep desire to create and contribute. We want to take risk, embrace our vulnerabilities, and be courageous. When learning and working are dehumanized, when you no longer see us and no longer encourage our daring, or when you only see what we produce or how we perform, we disengage and turn away from the very things that the world needs from us, our talent, our ideas, and our passion. What we ask is that you engage with us, show up beside us, and learn from us. Feedback is a function of respect. When you don't have honest conversations with us about our strengths and our opportunities for growth, we question our contributions and your commitment. Above all else, we ask that you show up, let yourself be seen, and be courageous. Dare greatly with us. And that concludes chapter, I believe, I'm not going to say the number. It's the disruptive engagement chapter, okay? Chapter 6. Awesome, awesome manifesto. Would love to know your thoughts. I hope you got tons of value from this particular chapter or this Read With Me session. You know we have a playlist in this particular channel where you can check back, listen in on the previous chapters, all the books that we read this year and we've read so far. So definitely take advantage of that. Would love to know your thoughts, your feedback, your comments, all of that good stuff. Opportunities for growth as well as the strengths. List them out. But next chapter is chapter 7. Wholehearted parenting, daring to be the adults we want our children to be. Chapter 7. We're going to dive into that in the next Read With Me session. I appreciate your time. Appreciate you being here and appreciate your commitment to your personal development, your personal growth, to be the best leader that you can be so that you can make those ripple effects and shine your light in your world and in the world. So appreciate you. Love you. You're perfect. You're amazing. And we'll see you in the next Read With Me session shortly here. Take care.